we talking about today?
Do I look like a red-eyed tree frog?
Definitely.
A little creepy.
Yeah.
Like a creepy frog.
People are going to be like, whoa, can't handle this.
Ribbit.
Never mind. First test is, can you read amphibians backwards?
Right. I cannot.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get started. Hello, everyone. This is an episode of Wednesday Wisdom. Every Wednesday at 4, we want to do some sort of educational live video, and so today we're going to be talking about Pac-Man frogs.
Yay, Pac-Man frogs.
So if you have any questions along the way, let us know. And then if you think of any future video ideas you'd like to see about animals, products, behind the scenes here, let us know, and we'll see what we can do.
See what we can do.
Yeah.
No promises.
Yeah, but always open to suggestions, definitely. So I'm going to let Ashley take it away with her immense knowledge of Pac-Man frogs.
I don't know. You know what? To be perfectly honest with you, I've had some pet Pac-Man frogs. I've cared for Pac-Man frogs a lot, but I'm probably not really a Pac-Man frog expert. I've never bred Pac-Man frogs. There are lots of people that have. There are lots of people that know more than me, but they are really, really interesting different pets that can be appropriate for a lot of different people. So we even have a kit that can be used for Pac-Man frogs. And what we're going to show you today is kind of the basics for setting them up, a little bit of the care information, maybe try to tackle some questions if you have them. We'll see what I can do. And, yeah, have some fun. Froggy fun. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So, right over here, we've got our little buddy who's now going to look the other way.
He was set up perfectly when we started this.
The Pac-Man frog.
Oh boy.
There he goes. And this is an albino Pac-Man frog. They come in a huge variety of different colors. Lots of different colors, really. It's like a rainbow, honestly. And this one happens to be albino, so he's got this kind of yellow and orange coloration going on. He's got the red eyes. Pac-Man frog is a large frog from South America. It's not like a tree frog, so you can kind of see he doesn't really have like the sticky toes. He's got more toadish type feet. They're ambush predators, which means that they just kind of lay in wait for their prey to come along, and their prey is literally any creature that would fit inside his giant mouth. We call him, as a common name, we call him a Pac-Man frog because he kind of resembles that video game character Pac-Man. It's just kind of a head with a mouth, and they literally will eat anything that fits inside their ginormous mouth. So these animals will kind of burrow down into the leaf litter and earth at the base of a tree or in some, cozy little nook, and just wait for a mouse or another frog or a lizard or a little bird or insects or whatever to come along, and then they spring really quickly, open up that mouth really wide. They've got a giant sticky tongue in there, and just grab whatever that creature happens to be. So they're not terribly active, although this guy's going to prove me wrong and be moving all over the place.
He's going to be a butt this whole time.
We brought his habitat into our animal room in one of our work areas because the spot where it's situated is not easy to film. So he might be a little extra active because he's in a different location right now and he's just kind of curious about what's going on. But as you can see, they don't need a terribly huge habitat because naturally they're not very active animals. Like I said, they kind of burrow down. So what you really want to do is make sure that you have a pretty solid layer of substrate, of like a moist forest floor type substrate. We use recti soil. And you want to have at least 2 inches.
He's just
Meredith
avoiding the camera at all
Meredith
costs.
is doing her very best to chase this little guy around. He's all over the place. So you want to have a good substrate that they can kind of burrow into. We like to use moss as a topper. We want to maintain a good humidity of 70% or more. We give them a nice big water dish that gets cleaned out every day and sometimes a few times a day, that he can get all the way into. And some of them will soak in their water occasionally. We also like to give him a hide. We're using a piece of cork in there that he can go underneath if he wants, make sure that he feels sheltered and protected. But otherwise, they've got a pretty simple setup. They are a tropical animal, and they prefer temperatures of like 75 to 84 degrees. So we have a nice warm room, and he doesn't really require any extra heating. But a small heat lamp or an under-tank heater on the side of the habitat would probably be just fine for this animal. We do keep a thermometer on the tank that shows what times that the temperature is. The one that we're using is actually a dual gauge that shows the temperature and the humidity, so that we can monitor and maintain both of those. So here's our dual. What if I turn it?
Oh, there we
See it
go.
better?
Yeah.
So this is a thermometer and humidity gauge. It gives us a digital readout so that we can make adjustments as necessary. These guys are really easy to take care of. We feed them usually just once a week. They'll get kind of a treat. We'll give them a live cricket on like a Tuesday, and then we feed them their main meal on Thursday usually. But it depends on how quickly they're metabolizing and everything. Sometimes they only need to be fed every 7 to 10 days, depending on what you're feeding and how active they are. But they're definitely not an everyday feeder type animal, so that's helpful sometimes.
And so a lot of people feed them like insects, and there's a lot of variety, but we also make like a formulated diet just in case, like,
right.
Always feed them variety, but you can also feed them this formula that if you add water to, it forms like a clump.
Yeah, so this is Pacman frog food, and this is in the light. How's that?
Yeah,
is that
that's
better? Good. So the Pacman frog food it comes as a powder, and you mix a little bit of water in with it, and you kind of smush it around, and it turns into like dough. And this dough is formulated for their health and really as a complete diet, and it can be used for Pacman frogs, pixie frogs, and other animals similar to that. So it's kind of a simple diet. Some people will even feed mice. Some people will feed goldfish. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but using a staple like this can make sure that all the needs are being met, because sometimes whole prey items aren't as complete as we'd like them to be, especially because the variety of whole prey items that are available in for pet feeding is different than the variety that they would be exposed to in nature. So to make sure that all of those little gaps are getting filled and all the nutritional needs are being met, using a staple like this and always dusting your feeder crickets and any other insects or anything with calcium and multivitamins can always help keep your frogs happy and healthy.
And someone wanted to know how long Pacman frogs live for.
So Pacman frogs actually can live a pretty long life, probably about 7 to 10 years. So I mean, really, for a frog, that's a pretty long-lived pet, especially if you consider like a hamster is going to be 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. And what's the name of this particular color variety? So you said it's albino, but there's different kinds of Pacman frogs too, right?
Oh yeah, there's so many different varieties. And some of them have been given like designer names. I'm not an expert, so I'm not aware of all of the different varieties that are out there right now. I've seen like strawberry and pineapple, and there's some that are almost blue in color, and some that are green, and some that are brown, and they really come in a very wide group variety. I've seen some have almost a translucent skin that you can kind of see through. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Someone asked if you can put them in a bioactive terrarium.
So I really don't see any reason why you couldn't. You'd want to keep an eye because, like I said, they like to burrow, so they might uproot some of your plants, depending on where he wants to go. But I find that ours usually, like, they kind of pick a favorite spot, and so it's not like they're moving all around and digging burrows all over the place. They just kind of find their spot where they like to hunker down. So yeah, I really don't see a reason why you couldn't put them in a bioactive setup. You do want to watch the cleanliness of your substrate and of your water and everything, because they spend so much time buried within it. If you have bad bacteria or anything like that, it can cause infections on their skin because they have that sensitive amphibian skin. But you know, the setup that we have here is it's simple, but we've got a couple that have more of the bioactive properties going on, and they seem to work really well. Any other questions?
Oh, it says, do they need moss, or is just cocoa fiber okay?
So just cocoa fiber should be fine as long as you can maintain it at the right moisture level. I like to use moss myself, but it shouldn't be absolutely necessary. It can help kind of seal in some of the moisture down below and create a really natural environment. Cocoa fiber is it's really loose naturally, so probably the floor where they would be living could be a little bit more compact than that. So kind of giving them, at least you want to give them like a piece of cork or some kind of shelter that they could get underneath, because that loose fiber may not always feel quite secure enough for them.
Someone asked if they're loud at night.
Honestly, I don't think I've ever heard them. I mean, definitely not in like a disturbing way. They're not like gonna sing or croak all night the way that like local tree frogs or something would.
Yeah. Another question related to feeding. Someone said, are mealworms and superworms okay to feed them?
I think that mealworms and superworms, mealworms especially, would be a very, very small meal for this guy. I mean, if you look at the size of his mouth, he doesn't want to eat a whole bunch of something little. He wants to eat a little bit of something big. So it just made an efficient way, and not really a real, he may not respond to them as if they're food, because they're pretty small. You may be able to feed him a superworm. I would probably remove its head before doing so, just for safety. But and I wouldn't have that be the main part of their diet.
Yeah. And definitely, if you're going to have this as a pet, you should do more research about their total diet. They do accept a large amount, like they will try to eat a large amount of insects, but you just need to make sure that you're giving them a balanced diet and keeping them fed well.
Yeah. Also, watch your fingers.
Oh yeah.
Every once in a while at feeding time, they get real excited, and we take them out of the habitat, and then we make this dough ball, and we tongue feed it to them. And so since they're used to their food coming to them, sometimes when you go to them with your hand, they may mistake you for food. I have been bitten by more than one Pacman frog. Thankfully, it's not you know, anywhere close to a life and death situation. But, you know, I get to tell my friends that I was bitten by a frog, which is a little weird. Wash your hands, always wash your hands before and after handling amphibians. And that's because their skin can absorb so much. And so if you have oils on your hands from, you know, anything you were doing earlier in the day, just environmental factors or whatever, that could potentially cause harm to their skin. So you don't want to do that. He's kind of digging in right now with his back leg, Sam. And then also, you know, just as with any other pet, really, you should always wash your hands thoroughly after handling them, just to prevent zoonotic diseases and, you know, anything that could be transmitted from them to us or to young siblings, young children, you know, immunocompromised people that could get sick from these kind of pets. So yeah. Wash your hands. Don't put them on your dining room table. Don't feed them with your...
Don't spoon feed them with like your utensils.
Spoon feed them with your spoon and fork that you're going to eat dinner with. Don't wash them in your kitchen sink. Don't wash their food dishes in your kitchen sink or their water dishes. Find a different place to do that. And if you have to, then always sanitize your sink afterwards. Because that's where we prep food and stuff like that. And you really don't want to risk it.
One thing we might have talked about, but how big does their tank have to be and how many can be kept together?
Okay. So for a Pacman frog, a 10-gallon tank is perfectly sufficient. Like I said, they're not real active. They're not going to climb all over the place even when given the opportunity. For the most part, they're just going to hunker down and get comfy. So a 10-gallon tank, which is what we've got this one in, is plenty of space.
I'll do a little circle of the tank.
And as far as keeping them together, I would very strongly not recommend it. They can be aggressive with one another, and if there's any size difference, one may eat another. So you got to be really careful about that. Like I said, I've never bred them. I believe it's a pretty delicate process, and making sure that you have a pair that's going to get along okay, and probably supervised visits only instead of keeping them together. But I would not recommend housing them together. Or with any other animals,
yeah,
for that matter.
Unless you want them to eat it.
Unless you want them to eat it.
I feel like we've covered most everything. Talked about diet, talked about temperature, size of the tank.
Yeah. Keeping them clean.
Yeah.
Keeping them warm. They're thought not to have much of a UVB requirement because they are found on the floor of the forest, so they don't get exposed to very much UVB. There's just not that much light that penetrates that deep down. But using a low output UVB lamp certainly won't do it any harm. You could cause problems by using a high output UVB lamp because, like we have talked about in the past, we don't want to get sucked into this idea of thinking that if some is good, more is better. Really want to make sure that you're using lamps like UVB lamps and stuff appropriately.
Oh. Anything that moves.
I know. Look at him. But especially if you're having like a bioactive style terrarium or something like that, you could use some fluorescent lights that don't emit UVB or very low levels of UVB for your plant growth. LED lights actually work great for plants. They don't provide any excess heat, so you won't make your tank too hot. One of the difficult things about setting up a habitat that's smaller than 10 gallons is it's really difficult to maintain a thermal gradient where there's a warm side and a cool side in a footprint that small. So, in this tank, you could put a heat lamp or an under tank heater on the side, like over towards one side of the habitat, and then your animal can move in and out of the heat as necessary and kind of can thermoregulate, where if you have them set up in a really super small tank, it can be harder to provide those different temperature zones, and you might end up with a tank that's more or less the same temperature all the way across, which isn't always the wrong way to go, but it doesn't allow the animal to have options. And even though the ambient temperature in the rainforest or something is going to be somewhat homogeneous in a small zone, the animals they have options that they wouldn't have in a captive environment. So they could bury down really deep to get away from the heat, or really could find a different place to go to. They have that opportunity. So I always like to kind of make a note about that, about the ability to thermoregulate and things like that. This isn't really on the same topic, but there are some desert animals that people recommend keeping without a water dish because they're found in a part of the world where you would very rarely find standing water. My theory about that is that they have more options. They could dig down deep. They're also put under a large amount of stress by not having, when they can't find the resources that they need. So being able to provide them with different options, whether it's temperature, whether it's humidity, whether it's water options, shade, UVB, all of those different things can allow them to better care for themselves, so that we're not making mistakes in their care by providing them with the ability to have some control. So there's my little soapbox for the day.
Yeah, we're not really getting any more questions, so
right.
I feel like we've pretty much covered
Nailed it.
general care about these guys. If you think we missed something that you were like, man, I really wanted to know about that, just direct message us. If you want to know something unrelated to Pac-Man frogs that you want us to do in one of these live videos, let us know, and we'll try to do it for you guys. But I think that's going to end today's video. Thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah. See you next time.